In this episode, we speak with Scott Aggett, founder of negotiation service Hello Haus. Scott's deep understanding of sales, buyer psychology and market dynamics makes him uniquely placed to talk about one of the most misunderstood parts of a property transaction, the negotiation. We unpack what buyers are getting wrong when they go head-to-head with agents, why the property negotiation landscape is shifting, and how a new model, negotiation as a service, might reshape the way we buy property in Australia.
Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. This is the podcast where we love to talk about the big things in property that never usually get talked about. I'm Veronica Morgan, real estate agent, buyer's agent and buyer's agent mentor, co-host of Foxtel's Location Australia, author of Auction Ready and co-host of Your First Home Buyer Guide.
Hi, I'm Chris Bates, mortgage broker, currently ranked number 3 in the MPA Top 100 Mortgage Broker Awards. Before we get started, everything we talk about today is not personal advice, and we recommend you engage the services of a licensed and experienced professional.
Our guest today is Scott Aggett, who's spent over 30 years in the property industry and negotiated more than 4,000 deals across Australia, the UK and Asia. From launching Bell Property's first offices in Sydney's East to navigating high-pressure transactions at Foxtons in London, Scott has seen how the real estate system is engineered to serve sellers, often at the buyer's expense. And today we'll be talking about what it takes to shift the power dynamic in a negotiation, why traditional buyer's agents might not be the best fit for every buyer, and how Scott's negotiation first model is changing the way Australians buy property. We're also going to look at the growing appetite for smarter, leaner buying strategies and what the rise of buyer advocacy services says about where the market is heading. We are looking forward to this meaty chat. Welcome, Scott. Good to see you again.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I haven't seen you for ages, Veronica. Hello.
I know.
Chris.
It's been a while.
Hey, Scott. And Veronica kind of said new. I think it's not really new, right? You've been doing this service, like negotiation service, for a number of years. And it'd be interesting to what made you launch that service? Because it was new, though, at the time, right? I mean, you had the traditional buyer's agents and it was either full service or, maybe some online $2,000 service or some weird service. But what made you launch it, and what's some of your learnings about launching this service? Why it got such good cut through over the years?
Yeah, okay. So I launched it about 8 years ago after doing 23 years as an estate agent, as Veronica just said in the introduction. And really, it was off the back of my frustration with doing the job as a sales agent. So you'd see the buyers week in, week out. You'd service them for a matter of many months. You'd have great rapport with them, but they just couldn't transact. So they lacked strategy, they lacked confidence, they lacked analysis skills, and they certainly didn't have a clue on the whole how to negotiate. So the one thing that I really loved was negotiation, and I felt I was good at it. And obviously any agent that's doing any form of volume gets a lot of practice at it, so they get to hone that craft. And I had a real interest in understanding the nuances of why people were making mistakes, where I won in the negotiation, where I might have said something wrong and that led to a different outcome. So I was paying attention to that while I was going through that process. So my frustrations with being an estate agent was in my market, where I was in the eastern suburbs in Sydney, you had to lie to win. And I've had this argument with many of my competitors over the years who swear blind they don't lie, and that's not how you win. But we would go into listing presentations, and unless you quoted high, and then that required you quoting then low to buyers at the other end, that really was a game that you couldn't win if you wanted to, lay straight in bed and do the right thing. So I struggled with that, just with my own personality. Probably did it for many years too long, because it was a good money maker for the family and for me. And there's a bit of an ego scratch when you do that and you're making lots of money as a young guy or girl. But I really wasn't fulfilled in that role, and I went looking for, what if I could build a negotiation only service, because that's what I love. And then I saw the rise of the buyer's agents in Sydney. So I watched these same buyers that would be with me for months and months then sort of come to the table in a negotiation and bring a weapon. They bring a buyer's agent, right? And typically, not all of it, because there were some really great buyer's agents back then that are still around and really active today, and they've been doing the right thing by their clients for 2 decades now or more. But there was a lot of buyer's agents at that point that I dealt with that were only interested in getting to the finish line as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And the best way to phrase that for me is paying a premium with a cherry on top. And they would do whatever they could to basically pin you into a corner where there was no further buyer competition, so that I felt they overinflated the price to their customer to then justify the price that they paid without any competition. So they bought, below market value because it was never tested. So Veronica and I have had a lot of these, conversations over the last 2 decades behind the scenes talking about it and the problems in the industry. But that was really what I saw at the coalface. And I thought, okay, well, there's got to be a better way. So if I go and build this negotiation service, there's a couple of things I've got to do. First of all, it's got to be transparent. The whole industry is all smoke and mirrors. So I've got to live or die by the sword on every negotiation, and it's got to be performance driven. So it's going to be, analysing properties accurately, giving confidence to the buyer to then set their own price, so they remain in control and they set what I call the target price, and then being able to easily quantify the saving I made them through performance-driven negotiation. And that worked really well, and it resonated with the media and things, so I got a lot of attention at the start of that, stupidly on my behalf, because I launched it as Australia's only, no-win, no-fee negotiation service. So whilst it got a lot of attention and whilst it worked really well, all I attracted was the bottom feeders who didn't want to pay. And then, the more I advertised how much money I was saving, the lower the target prices kept coming.
Yeah.
These are silly things you do when you first start out a business, but that was how it was born. And then I developed that over a 7-year period.
Scott, with negotiation though, how do you, because I agree, I mean, I think that's the challenge of agents, right? Like it's, you come into the appraisal, it's not a great property, you want the listing, because if you don't get the listing, your competitor gets it. And the vendor obviously has values their own things more than what the market is. It's just a behavioural bias. If you tell them the realistic number, they're like, oh, so-and-so believes in my property more, and you lose a listing, right? So you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? And but on the negotiation side, isn't a lot of the negotiation also bending the truth a little bit? How do you feel like, because you're acting more for a buyer though, you're being real with your buyer, but maybe the agent, you're kind of feeding him back, you're playing their own game a little bit back at them?
Yeah. Well, I guess you could take that question two ways. So do you mean that I'm bending the truth back to help the buyer, or do you mean that the negotiator could easily still bend the truth to the purchaser in terms of inflating their expectations of what they need to pay to buy it?
All of the above could happen.
Yeah. So the latter of that is really true. Like, it would be really easy for me to influence you, Chris, in that regard, to say to you, well, look, the comparable sales are 750 at 800. You're going to have to pay 850 to buy this, and here's all the reasons why. Even though it's only worth 780,000, that is an incredibly easy thing to do. So unless you've got a moral compass, and that's been the biggest challenge for me, is to actually explain to people through marketing, when you're competing against all these big buyers agents and all these other people that have got huge marketing machines, that actually it's the moral compass part of it that is so important, and that you're dealing with someone that actually is looking after your best interests and is in this long term and doing the right thing. So I guess that's served me well, 8 years later, is that I've now got a business where I probably get 3 referrals a day. I don't do any marketing. It's all organic. I didn't even have a website until a couple of months ago. So there's that builds and builds and builds over, lots of transactions and doing the right thing. But yeah, I definitely play the game in reverse. If I answer the first part of your question, if I interpret it the right way, I definitely do that. And I use, my skills understanding what the buyer's agent is doing to us in reverse, to control that narrative as best as possible, to reverse the fear of loss onto the seller, and to use that in time pressure to an advantage for us to be able to lower the price and save the customer money.
It's not always possible though, is it, Scott? I mean, in a rising market, or when there's a really good asset and you know that there's going to be lots of buyers on that property, the highest bidder is going to be the one that buys the property. So there are times when saving money isn't the higher objective. There are times when, for certain circumstances, when securing the property, but with guardrails, I guess is probably the best way to say that, is a better objective and a better discussion than rather than, this is how much money I can save you. Would you agree?
Yes, 100%. And I think that's a bit that a lot of people overlook as well. And it was a problem with the marketing when we merged with the bigger business last year when Hello Haus was acquired. There was very much a focus on how much money we could save. But it's very difficult to market the business, that negotiation service, that one of the really big positives is actually winning in traffic. So when I would actually talk to people and have a one-on-one with someone that's looking at engaging us, I would say, in a lot of instances, I'm not going to be able to save you any money, but I am going to give you a much higher percentage chance that you're going to win in competition and you're not going to overpay. Yeah, you're going to, by virtue of that, you have to be the highest bidder to win it. But it's all about not getting carried away, not spending emotionally, not being bluffed into spending more than you would have otherwise seen value at. So there's a huge, I think, importance in being honest around that. And I think it's a good point that you address. It's something I bring up all the time with the client.
I think too, you talk about buyer's agents, and certainly I'm critical of probably more buyer's agents than I am not critical of, to be quite frank. I'm sure all of our listeners know that. But when you've got a transactional buyer's agent where for them it's about the deal, it's not really about whether that's the right property for you or the right price, an appropriate price to pay. And then you've also got an agent that's also trying to get the best possible price, but also, you understand, the agent, if there's lots of people on a property, they don't have to try too hard to get the best possible price. They don't even have to negotiate with you. You're competing with other buyers. And so I've seen many buyer's agent clients get stitched up because they've really got two agents working against them for their own best interests.
Yeah.
So, but I'm guessing that if someone comes to you and says, right, I want you to negotiate for this property, they've found the property themselves, right? So you're not really trying to transact on something you've recommended necessarily to get that client off your books. You're saying, right, you want to buy this? We'll work out how to go about buying this so that you don't overpay. Is that sort of the basic pitch?
Yes, but I think to sort of give you a bit of context around that, and the numbers are really loose, as I'm sure you guys have delved into before, but let's say hypothetically there's 5% of Australians that use professional paid help. That means 95% of Australians are otherwise going it alone, right? So my idea was, how do I transform the way that Australians buy property and have a big influence on the industry, not just become one of the thousands of people competing in the lane of being transactional and competing for the 5%. So I very much made not a secret, I should say, I'm trying to say that the right way, that I was going after that 95% to really make a big difference for people. And with that means that I was skilling up the army of people that are going out there looking for their own home. So yes, I was taking it for granted that you've seen the house you like, Veronica. You've been through multiple times. You might want to get a checklist from me of what you should be looking for, and we're certainly going to analyze that property for you. And I'll be brutal in the analysis and say, there's only value here. And that was to our detriment at Hello Haus, and we had that business, is that we had to do so much repeat work because we would talk clients out of buying properties all the time. Properties that they'd fallen in love with, but we couldn't find comparable sales evidence of where the vendor or the agent had positioned it, and we would talk them out of that. And that cost us a lot of extra time and rework, but it's the right thing to do. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening very much in our industry. There's plenty of really good buyers agents, but there's more transactional people from what I can see, or at least the transactional agencies have a bigger impact because they're buying volume and you see it more often.
Yeah, I probably agree with that. But the thing is, though, that what you're doing is it's limited in scale. If you're just negotiating, you're not actually doing due diligence or advising them on the colour of the property or anything like that. Is that correct? You're just literally looking at, okay, how can we work out what the right price to pay is for this property?
Yeah, so we're taking it that you've done the inspection if you're the buyer, and you've done your own market research because you've been looking for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it might be. So you have an understanding of where the value sits and lifestyle-wise and those things that are applicable to you. Most of our clients would have gone and done a building and pest report, so they'll have some sort of research. We would complete all the due diligence in terms of the checklist of other things like easements and fire, flood, heritage, and those other basic metrics that everyone would need to know. Because if we're going to run the analysis, we need to understand all the red flags there as well, right? So that's part of our analysis. But yeah, there's no way that you can do both things unless you're local and a buyer's agent that's on the ground physically doing those inspections for them. It's impossible to have a swing to service 95% of Australians because it's such a big country and it's so broad. So that's the compromise with that service. It's like, okay, well, the customer has to be involved in the process. But I would argue that whilst that service is compromised in that regard, and I think that's definitely something that should be spoken about, and obviously all of our clients were aware of that because they were hunting for their own property. The flip side of that, of going it alone, it's not even, they're two different outcomes altogether. Like you've got people that are taking 10.1 months to buy on their own, 45% of Australians reporting they got buyer's remorse, either overpaid or compromised on the asset or both. It's not a great experience. Chris will know this from his clients. The mortgage brokers, will give me this feedback all the time. So I looked at it and thought, okay, well, if I can, shorten their days on market, I can increase the quality of the process, the buying process for them, and give them security that they bought an asset that they were happy with at the lowest price we could and did the basic level of analysis and due diligence. And it's a low cost and it's performance driven. How many ways can I make that as fair as possible and equitable in terms of that decision? The alternative is to go spend a lot more for a localised BA, of course. But I don't think
where I was going to go with that. I thought, well, there obviously must be a cost advantage for the purchaser, for your client. They're getting a more thorough, I guess, way of buying a property or a better way of buying a property. But it's a sort of cut down version of a local buyer's agent. And so therefore there must be a cost advantage. Can you tell us sort of generally how does the cost model work? I mean, I would say that what we don't do on the Elephant in the Room is get people to promote their businesses, but I'm keen to understand the delta between, say, a service such as yours and a full search service with a buyer's agent.
Well, so the first thing to address is I don't have that business anymore, right? So I'm not operating that model and doing that today. So that's not in existence. So our fee when I finished at Hello Haus on average was $7,200 for people that were going it alone, doing that sort of buyer assist rather than extra work that could have been added onto that. I think the key thing to understand, if you're putting this into some sort of context, though, is what my realization was, and that was sort of my expectation when I went to set this business up in the first place as well, is that the 95% of people aren't looking for a buyer's agent.
No.
They don't want a buyer's agent. They either don't know you exist as a localized buyer's agent. They certainly don't want to pay you 2.5% or whatever some of these buyer's agents are getting. So it's not it's either going it alone and making a dog's breakfast of it, or it's paying a fraction of the cost for a performance-driven thing as an insurance policy. So I looked at it as that. It's like, okay, well, that's a really good halfway house, if you like, for the vast majority of Australians. And I think more and more, having gone through that for 7 years, people have come out of the woodwork, certainly in the last 6 months, to say, really, that is the future of how Australians are going to transact. There has to be more of that because it has to be affordable. It can't be 2.5% of the purchase cost because stamp duty is so high and there's so many other costs involved.
Well, that's it. There's a real limit. Yeah, there's a limit to how many people can afford a buyer's agent.
Well,
but
and
it's
they don't want to spend it a lot of the time. The amount of time I spend educating clients, I'll spend 30 minutes. They've got the cash. They are buying in a very competitive market. They've been looking for too long. They,
it's a grudge purchase.
Analysis paralysis. They're a perfect client to be speaking to a buyer's agent. We refer them to someone very, very experienced who's been doing it 10, 20 years, got a small business. They're a great operator. They know how to close a deal. So it's not the buyer's agent and it just doesn't happen, right? There's an anxiety about paying that fee because it is quite a large fee. And I think, your service does sit quite nicely with those because they know they need help, but they don't want the full service. And a lot of buyer's agents sometimes offer the negotiation service, but sometimes it's also a way of just trying to upsell their bigger service. And the client feels like that. They feel like, they know that if they miss out on this one, that they're going to pitch me the full service. Because have you found that as well, Veronica, in terms of buyer's agents? They come in with this somewhat negotiation service, but really it's just masks to get them on the full service?
Yes, I can imagine that's the gateway service in many cases. I know in my own business, if somebody comes in with a property that they've found, and if it's a great property, then great. We're delighted to help them with an evaluate, negotiate service to buy that property. But quite often, with a local buyer's agency, they'll come in with a property that's really shit. Yeah,
that's true.
And so we've got to go through that whole process of having them see how shit it is, which is part of our evaluation process. But so it's not as cynical as that, but we often talk to them to say, look, let's talk about a full search first. And if you want to go for this property, we're happy to cap it at the fee it would be just to evaluate that property if you buy it within, say, 2 weeks of its auction date. So we're sort of giving them the best of both worlds, but they also know what they're up for so it's not meant to be a loss leader. But Scott, I'm curious too, because you scaled the business, you sold Hello Haus, and now you're back in the negotiation business. You're going to put up Mark II, whatever that is going to be. Like you said, you don't have a website yet, but watch this space, I guess. But, you scaled it. You had, I don't know, a lot of negotiators on your team. I mean, the best negotiators, wouldn't you think the best negotiators are working for the best agents and they're out there selling property, wouldn't you? Or they're really good buyers agents and they're working out they're the top of their game. How do you get an army of negotiators that can do the job as well as you could do the job? Because it's a high degree of emotional intelligence, psychology, reading people, understanding dialogue, being able to hit dialogue with there's so much understanding the whole process and understanding when they're being fed a lie versus when they're not. You know what I mean? There's so many nuances to it. How do you train those skills at scale?
First of all, starting with people that have been in the agent seat for a significant amount of time themselves. So every one of the team that I had were ex-agents, and I would never hire anyone in that seat unless they were.
Okay.
You have to know both sides of the coin. So I find it laughable when you see buyers agents doing negotiation masterclasses and they've been a buyer's agent for 2 years or 3 years. They've never sat on the other side of the coin. They've got no idea the process that the agent's going through, and this is the stuff that we have to deal with all the time, right? So that's the first thing. They have to come from a longevity in the industry and understand.
But are they retired?
How to manage that.
I mean,
no. I mean, I had people leave for different reasons. Like this is a thing that I reckon I've got a conveyor belt forever of real estate agents that want to leave being real estate agents for the same reason I left. there is such a high turnover of good quality people who don't want to miss school sport on Saturday, don't want to be in a suit all day, don't want to drive a BMW, don't want to have a Coke, habit anymore, or whatever they do in the eastern suburbs or Lower North Shore or wherever else they are. Like, people are over that lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
And they want to have a well-paid job where they are involved in the client. And when you flip, when you flip to the other side, all of a sudden you go from, like, part of the job that I hated as a real estate agent was you're almost fighting with your vendor to get them to a level where they're going to see reality, and you're fighting with the buyers to get them to a level where your vendor is going to trade at. You flip to the buy side, working for the buyers, and it's all roses. Like, they trust you, they like you, you're there to protect them, and it's a much nicer job day to day. So there's an easier sell for me to be able to bring people across from the real estate agency side and say, okay, great, I can still pay you well. You're probably not going to get those really high numbers, but it's not going to be the same level of stress. It's not going to be the same hours necessarily. And it's just a much nicer job. And there's a lot of people that will take less money for a better quality life. And it worked out well. But there is a balance of that. You said, how can everyone be as good a negotiator as me? I'd like to think I'm really good at it from doing it lots, but without the ego, take that bit away from it. You're not going to have everyone that's at the same level as you or me, Veronica, who have done it for that long. It's an experience thing. So then the only thing that I could do to replicate that is coach. So, twice a week for an hour, breaking down every single deal that went through that we won or lost. Actually, the best thing I ever did was at the start of last year, I sort of challenged myself. I'm going to write every day on LinkedIn. And what I did is I went into those sales meetings on a Monday and a Thursday, and I just took notes, pages and pages of notes of what you said to the agent and what happened next, what the buyer did and then what the agent said or whatever it was. And I took all these notes. And then I was able to go there and sit in quiet and then break down the psychology of the buying process and the negotiation process. Me then putting that into words, like a storytelling piece, my staff, like the team, just go, okay, now we get it. The pennies drop. Like, how you think, how you do it differently, what you're looking for. Literally right before we took the start of this call, I just did a deal in Sydney for $6 million. And the first thing I did is call my lead VA and say, have you got 10 minutes? He's like, yep. So great, let's talk about this deal. This is what I said. This is what they did. This was the lead up to it. This is what I said. That's how I framed it. And that was the outcome. And he's like, okay, that's awesome. Great. So we're just constantly honing the craft because we want to be better, right? And we want to save our clients money. And that's worked really well for me over the years.
Scott, yeah, I like your posts. Yeah. They're I recommend anyone ever read them. I read them. Yep. Dealt with that. Heard that one before. It's
totally.
I mean, a lot of buyers agents talk about, when you talk about their value propositions, they'll say, look, it's the local market knowledge. Yep. There's also local agent knowledge. And then they'll also say that we know how all the different agents in the area, we know how they like to work, whether they go to auction or like to sell prior, or whether they like you to come in strong, or whether you like to start low because they like to condition their vendor, and they don't like it when I do this, or, how do you, when you, and I think one of the benefits of your service is you can scale, right, nationally, right? Like, because you're not on the street looking at properties, right? And how do you get that read of the agents' profiles and the different agents, and, how to negotiate with them the best, because every agent works differently? How do you get that really fast to help you win the negotiation?
Ask really good questions and listen intently at the responses, and you can cut through all of that, I think, in seconds. Like, really quickly get an understanding of that. And I just ask brutal questions to people straight up and wait till they answer the question, and I just keep asking it in different ways until I get the answer. Sometimes I don't. You can't win them all. Some people just won't crack. And what you learn as well when you do this at scale is that I can tell you many of the highest profile agents in Australia and how they negotiate, because they use the same strategy over and over.
That's what I mean.
I know. Yeah. It's actually astounding.
You can punch holes through it, right? And work it out. But because I've done that so much, like thousands of this, you can work out who's playing those games pretty quickly, what types of games they're playing. And you can call BS on these things as well. So I'll give you a really simple example. This is really simple. So, this is not the high level negotiation, but if I ring you, Chris, and say, you're the sales agent, and I say, what buys it, Chris? Yeah. That's my favorite question. What buys it? Because you have to give me an answer to that, right? Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? You're going to give me a number? You're going to tell me a story? You're going to say no?
Usually.
Yeah. So, and it's in that question that you hang yourself straight away. Yep. So if you start telling me a story, well, we've had a heap of interest. We've got so much interest in it, and look, we've got 15 contracts out. Okay, bullshit. Yeah, keep going. Because you work out in human psychology, the more someone has to tell a story, they're not telling the truth, right? A good agent in that instance will say to you something really quickly, and because you ask this question hundreds of times a week, you see these patterns really clearly. So if I asked you that question and you said, look, we've had an offer at 650, the vendor's at 680, 680 buys it, that's a simple answer. Somewhere between 670 and 680 probably gets it over the line, but you'd have to be at that level, and you've got to move reasonably quickly because the 650 guy's still in the game, right? That's a legit answer. And someone can rattle that off straight away. And then, okay, well, then I know where the lay of the land is. Now, I don't trust that agent, so I still don't take that as gospel, but at least I can get a feel of, are they playing games, or is there a high percentage chance they're telling the truth? Yeah. So you can weave, you can weave these stories together very quickly. So I don't know that, I definitely see the advantage. Of course, it's non-negotiable that if you've got that deep knowledge locally, that's an advantage in that. But in terms of a negotiator, that out trumps deep market knowledge locally, I think, if you're a good negotiator. So if you can do the two of those things, all power to you. But there's just not that many people that are really strong negotiators that also have really strong local market and that are only focused on local market, because a lot of those people, like me, are doing it nationally, and scaling and doing other things and taking that to a wider audience.
Do you feel like you not have, like let's say it's a property in, I don't know, Timbuktu, and you don't know the agent, but you don't also know the local market, right? Like the reality is your clients come to you. Like, how does that sort of, using local past sales in the area and, I guess does that hold you back in any way with the negotiation? Like when you haven't actually been through past sales, or you haven't been to the auctions, and, that comparison to drive the agent to sort of take this offer, like you're kind of conditioning the agent to then condition the vendor. Like, is that hold you back at all? Like, or do you find that you have to just, do a bit more digging prior to speaking to the agent to really know the comparables? How do you get that market knowledge fast?
Well, I mean, there's certain markets where there's not a lot of comparable sales evidence, and that makes it really difficult. And some of the times when you're dealing in markets like that, the agents will actually make it really easy for you anyway. So a lot of the regional or less experienced agents will lead you to the finish line and the pot of gold straight away, right, with one or two questions. So that whole thing of, is that a problem, rarely is a problem for us, because you can find your way through that pretty quickly with the right questions and digging. When I'm in a situation, though, where I am unsure about where the price sits, if it's a unique property, it might be something like, I'm trying to buy something in Balmain where Veronica's the expert and it might have a view, right? Or it might be a difficult asset to replicate. So there's a fair fear of loss. There's going to be a lot of buyers that are in the marketplace. Someone will pay a premium for that because it's difficult to replicate. And in that instance, I would ring 3 or 4 local estate agents as well. And I would say, okay, I'm looking at 12 Smith Street in Rozelle. What's it worth? And they'll go, and a lot of the times I say, actually, one of my buyers has been through there, but they've already offered 2.7. They've rejected it. I know the vendor, we missed out on the listing. They were dead set on 3.5. The agent always underquotes. Like it'll be, So I get that sort of market intel pretty quickly from people around that sale that gives me that local knowledge and will give me a few extra data points that helps me arrive at a number. But this is a really interesting thing, and maybe this will shock you, Chris, might not shock Veronica. But I basically never use comparable sales in any negotiation. Okay. It's irrelevant to me.
As in, you don't, do you use them to formulate the price guidance for your client and then just don't use them in the negotiation, or do you not look at them at all?
Right. No. Of course. We're incredibly dialed in on what the property's worth before I open my mouth.
We don't use it either. There's no point.
But I never use it in any conversation whatsoever, because an agent could not give two tosses of what you think it's worth or what you base it on. It is all about what is the lowest price your seller is prepared to take, what is the highest price your buyer is prepared to spend. The rest of it is a grey area in the middle. I coach people to get to the grey area as quickly as possible. And then whoever bluffs best wins.
That's pretty much it. And I agree. There's people that want to put forward an essay and a case for themselves, in their offers. It's like, don't waste your time. It's pure luck if that works. And all you do is insult vendors and agents when you start betting around the head with comparable sales as well. It's like
totally. Yeah, you're the smartest person in the room. No one likes that.
You're not going to buy it because no one's going to work with you.
For every 12 Smith Street that you tell me, I've got 14 Smith Street that just sold, off market yesterday that you don't know about. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, it's just a one-upmanship. You've negotiated thousands of deals, but I mean, what patterns or mistakes do you see unrepresented buyers repeating? I mean, I guess you're not really seeing the buyers making the mistakes these days, but go back to your sales agent days. What are some of the things that buyers do that shoots themselves in the foot?
Yeah, at Listing Loop, I was really lucky that I had normally 8 meetings a day on the hour, every hour, with a buyer that was in a holding pattern that couldn't get it right themselves. Many of those were just starting out, but most of those were 3, 6, 9, 18 months into the process and couldn't do it themselves. So I was really lucky that I had a front row seat to understand what mistakes buyers will make. And really, the main one is strategy. So strategy is the biggest. Not having one, yeah. And so the easiest way to break that down is I'd be on the phone call with you, Veronica, and I'd ask you a series of questions of what you're looking for. And in the back end of my computer, I'm in realestate.com in the sold section, and I'm putting in all the filters that you tell me that you're looking for. And then I'll say to you, totally understand, I've got empathy with you, Veronica. I can see why you've been looking for 10 months.
Because there's nothing.
Because there hasn't been a fucking sale there for 3 years. Yeah,
exactly.
That meets your criteria.
And they say, I'm just waiting until one comes. And I'm like, it's not going to, because everything you want's selling for more than you can afford. You're not even looking at them. I'm on a personal mission to help more people make better property decisions. Most people don't realise that they can cost themselves hundreds of thousands of dollars over the medium to long term when they make property decisions without all of the information that they need. And what I do is help people with tricky real estate problems, which often masquerade as simple questions like, should I sell my investment property because the interest repayments are hurting? Or should I buy before I sell? Or the other way around. You can connect with me and access all of the tools that I've created to help you make better property decisions at veronicamorgan.com.au. And there you will find resources for first home buyers, details about my buyer's agent mentoring program. You can connect with my Sydney-based property management and buyer's agency teams, Australia-wide vendor advocacy, or ask me for introduction to the small group of buyer's agents that I would personally recommend across the country. That's veronicamorgan.com.au.
If you're looking to buy your first home, thinking of upgrading to a new one, or purchasing an investment property anywhere in Australia, we would love to carefully guide you through this journey and, importantly, get the finance right. Reach out via my website, alcove.com.au.
Yeah, so strategy is where it starts. And it was very often that I'd say, okay, great, well then let me just do a couple of things and play around with this. If I go from a 5-bed down to a 4-bed, for example, or I go from 600 square metres minimum lot to 400 square metres, if I go from 800 grand to 830 grand, if I go from Balmain and Rozelle, but now we include Lilyfield or Annandale, all of a sudden I can see now with just those little tweaks, whatever those tweaks were, or a combination of those, now I can see there's 20 properties that sold in the last 30 days. Now, are you willing to compromise on a 5th bedroom? Or would you do a 400 square metre block instead of 600? Would you live in Annandale or Lilyfield if you could afford that scenario? And the reality is for most people, they just don't realise that that's all they had to do to change their life was just look outside their little world and their bubble and see. So strategy was most important for me. Second thing is being misled by price by agents is the obvious one that is key, because, the question I said to you before, what buys it? Most buyers, having sat in the agent chair for so long like Veronica, no one asks questions like that. They'll ask,
they don't.
Stupid questions like, how many contracts have you got out?
Why is the vendor selling?
Yep. What's the guide price?
Yep.
So all of these things are just a open letter to a real estate agent to craft their own narrative to screw you over, right? So the throwaway answer was, for in Sydney, with how many contracts you got out, was 3 or 4.
Yeah,
now,
4.
if I told you there was 15, it'd scare you off. If I told you there was 1, it's human psychology. You don't think there's any interest in the property, so you lose interest in it, right? People want what they can't have. So all the agents just train themselves to know that the simple answer to that is 3 to 4. It creates competition on you. I can leverage that at a later point in a negotiation, and you're screwed, right? You're behind the 8 ball because I'll play on your emotions. Same with the guide price. Like, the guide price ain't worth the toilet paper it's written on, which is my throwaway line that I always use. It's got no relevance to market value whatsoever. So asking those questions or making a key value decision based on what the agent's quoting you is just ridiculous. So you need to determine really what market value is and how to understand how to analyze properties and work out where the value pockets are within suburbs and what the pros and cons are where people are trading up or down on price, pros or cons for those homes. So price is a really big thing that they get influenced by the agent. And then probably the one that, throws everyone is being out bluffed. It's very easy. Like, you pick up a phone and say to an agent, I've got an interest in the property. The next thing they always say is, well, we've just had an offer, or we've got an offer coming in, or we've just issued a contract, or I'm actually here now. I'm just showing someone through for a 3rd time. Like, they introduce buyer competition straight into the conversation, and you've got to be able to understand how to bluff them, how to not get bluffed. And that is near impossible for a buyer because it is experience in that and understanding the right question to ask, what the highest percentage play the response is that's going to come back, how you then circumnavigate to take the conversation and control the narrative. There's so many things that are important in that space, and no buyer should be doing that by themselves, I don't believe, or really has not many people. Even if they're bought 10 times, I dare say you have absolutely no idea what you're doing in the grand scheme of things compared to someone that does it day in, day out.
But even the buyer's agents that have been around for a very short period of time, the agents, like, they laugh at how gullible they are now. They swallow all their lines. And you know, they, like your question, you know, what will buy this? You know, it's a hard question to answer in many ways, right? So some agents don't actually know. You know, they don't know what will buy it. And you got to sort of try to work out how in control is the owner. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that you'll be picking up from however they answer that. But on the flip side of that, you've got agents that will come to a buyer and say things like, okay, well, thanks for your interest. If someone comes in with an offer higher than that, should I call you?
You
know, you know, like, I mean, how do you answer that without giving the game away? You have to got more money, or, you know, no, don't call me. Oh my God, I don't want to miss out on it. So the agents have got loads of questions like that, which are designed to pin a buyer into the corner and basically get you to show whether you've got more money. And and knowing how to answer that is exactly, and under pressure, and they will come at you with questions that you would not have thought of, and you're not anticipating. And you go, oh, well, there's my offer, and it expires at close of business.
Yeah, take it by 6 o'clock or I'm out. Yeah, exactly. That old chestnut,
which,
you know,
doesn't work either.
Scott, where's the? You know, obviously, I'm useless at buying, so hands in the air. You know, I tell the agent,
I'm useless at
I just want to brand.
You use a buyer's agent, I know.
And they always just tell me to shut up, to be honest, and don't even talk. So, because I just want to talk to them, I want to chat about the market, what's going on, you know. So I share way too much. So what are the things when? Yeah, because you can always save a client, right? As long as they haven't signed the contract, right? But what are the sort of things where you think, oh, I just really wish you didn't do that? Where are the things that, you know, it's really hard for you to sort of unwind to get a bit more power back in the negotiation? Is there anything that sort of stands out where, you know, because price sometimes people think, well, I can't offer less because they know I've got a budget for $2 million. Like, but, you know, you can get around things like that. But what are some of the things?
Well, they might have already offered something and then they come to you. How often does that happen?
Yeah, a lot. So putting their foot in with price is obviously the key one that people do all the time. So even clients that are working with me, I'll say, don't talk price. When the agent asks you and pins you in the corner and asks you, they're going to ask you in 10 different ways. And then they might not ask you what you want to pay for it, but they might ask, where does this sit compared to the last one that you really liked that sold? Or what's the best comparable for this that you think you've seen, or whatever. They'll ask loaded questions that is going to be used against you in a court of law, you know, in a week's time, whatever, when you go to negotiate, or whenever that might be. So price is a key one, because people will throw out a number, not realize that they will think nothing of it, but then the agent will hang me on that later on, and I've got to unwind it, start again, and blah, blah, blah. So that's one key thing. I think a few of the things that people don't think about, maybe that is maybe a subconscious thing that people do that gives away a lot of power in a negotiation, is often a buyer of mine will go through twice, and then I'll start negotiations, and then they'll say, I'm going back again at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. I'm like, don't go back again. Like, as soon as you start showing buying signs like that you're emotionally connected, because now I bet you bring your mum or
and
your
you
sister or your dad, or exactly. And now all you're doing is making my job harder. So go to ground, don't return their phone calls. Of course, just refer it all back to me and channel it back to that one place. So it's those little subtle signs that as an agent, you're like, oh my God, there's, you know, pin a tail on the donkey right there. Like, that's an easy one. I know you're emotionally connected, and I know I'm going to push you harder for that. There's also, they'll give away their cards in terms of answering questions. Like, if I was an agent, I might say to you, you know, earlier on in the piece, you know, where does this need to be positioned for you to have interest in it? Yeah, those types of questions. Have you got anything else that you're seriously chasing at the moment? You know, and then when you come to me in a week's time or 3 days' time and say, oh, we've already got another one that we're really interested in, I'm like, okay, sure you do. Yep, because otherwise you would have bought that, you know what I mean? So there are all those little things like that if you answer these questions, it is going to be used against you. So even back when I was an agent, so I finished in 2016, even then, that last 4 years or 6 years of my work, I had an Excel spreadsheet that I built for every vendor, and every single day I sent them the spreadsheet. It was with everyone's name, the date they inspected, whether or not they had a contract, whether or not they'd done a building and pest report. every single contact point and all the notes from the conversations, and I color coded them as to the level of interest they had and any offers that they made. Every single day I sent that to my vendors. So you can be sure, Chris, that when you rang me in week 3 and say, this is only worth $950, I'll be like, well, you told me 3 weeks ago you'd pay $980 for it, or whatever. I've got it all documented and I've got it right in front of me. And as soon as you pick up the phone, bang, I know that you're on the hook, and I know what else you've seen. I've recorded that I saw you at an auction because we were at every single auction of all of our competitors. We knew how much money you had because we'd asked you those questions previously. So, it's about building all these data points. And that was 10 years ago, or whatever, nearly 10 years ago. So I'm no doubt the agents are doing that at a much greater level again.
The CRMs are helping them do that in a much more sophisticated way these days than back then.
Yeah. Yeah, mine was super basic, but it was effective.
Yeah, it's the same principle, but yeah.
Just on that, so like the client, because when you're in the market, they might come to you a bit late, right? They're not like, oh, I want to buy a property, I'm going to call Scott. Like they usually go and get some pain. Same as buyer's agents. I feel like buyer's agents, you sort of, have to sort of chase the ambulance a little bit. The painful buyers are the ones who'll pay for the service, right? Not the ones that haven't gone through any pain yet because they don't realize how hard it is. And they often go, often say, oh, I'll see how I go first. And I'm like, well, that's quite a costly wait because you're already in September. And if you don't make this happen in the next 6 weeks, you're out till February. And so how do you, and by then every agent knows them. They've seen Jack and Jill at every single open home, and they know Jill's pregnant, and they know how keen they are, and they know they love this type of property because they went crazy when they saw. How do you sort of wind them back to in the agent's mind, sort of reframe them as buyers? Do you keep them anonymous? Do you how what are the ways you sort of wind them back so you get more power in the negotiation?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I agree with everything you said there because that's a real consistent theme with what I see when we're at Hello Haus as well, is that the clients want to just give it a go first and have a crack at it, and then often come back with their tail between their legs after they've lost like 3 or 4 times and spent however much time and money doing it. And there's obviously, as people get more and more educated about the benefits of it, there's a lot more people that choose to put their hand up and say, I don't want to go through that 10 months of headache, sign me up now and we'll do it right in the first place. But to answer the question, for the ones that have gone that far, they're emotionally connected, the agents know who they are and what they're chasing specifically, it still comes back to me, building rapport really quickly with the agent so that I can have a proper relationship and a proper chat with them, so that I can try to get some sort of control in that conversation to the best of my ability. Not always possible, but that's the goal for me, to build rapport really quickly. Ideally, at any stage in a negotiation, in terms of how long they've been on the market, the buyer, I can introduce leverage to reverse the fear of loss and try to put the vendor under some sort of pressure. But as Veronica will know, that will depend on how much competition you've got, where it is, in what stage of the campaign that you get it at. But I try to get to these properties at the earliest stage I possibly can, even if you're 10 months into the search in that instance. And in doing so, then use potentially, in that instance, this is one of, an arsenal of different things you could do, but potentially at that point, either be trying to buy it before the first open for inspection or try to buy it very quickly on the Monday after the first open for inspection. And it's using a second property as leverage or an anchor property at that point that might work in that scenario. Really what you've got to work out is the seller motivated to sell? And there's a whole heap of different reasons why they are, but typically it's because they're nervous, they've already bought somewhere, they're under financial pressure, or they're sick. They're the kind of 4 big ones that I see consistently. If they are, and if you've established that the agent is open to selling it quickly, or you've established that the agent is transactional, of which a huge portion of real estate agents in Australia are transactional, they'll take a quick sale over a higher price that they can get a week later just to move on to the next thing. It's very lazy. Similar that we're debating in the buyer's agent world, but very common on the sales side as well. So you've got to work out who you're dealing with. If you're dealing with an agent that's a Ray White auction trained agent, for example, that's very difficult to talk them out of the property week 1 or even prior to auction, because they've been trained to have their 4 weeks in the sun. They know that's how they build profile. If they can list and last in the industry, they've got to have their signboards up. They've got to have their neighbours. They've got to be telling that story of their success out in the sunshine, not behind closed doors. So you have to pick your battles with who you're dealing with, know your enemy in that regard, and then, use different tools like that are going to be applicable to the circumstances. So again, this is an experience thing, because there's not a one-size-fits-all strategy here. I can't go out and coach and say, use an anchor property every time, or tell them that you blah, blah, blah by this. You just can't do that. It's horses for courses.
That's it. And you do that and then they find out that's your modus operandi anyway, and it's that's how he buys every property. What about auction though? Do you guys bid at auction?
Very infrequently. I mean, I was an auction trained agent, so I'm anti buying an auction for all those reasons. If a client has to go to auction, we'll bid and do our best to buy it at the lowest possible price. But my own personal belief is you've lost complete control, or a lot of majority of control going to auction, because you can't control, the depth of the pockets that you're competing against. You can't control the vendor's motivation. You can't control the agent's actions under that. You can do everything within your own power, but you're still never in complete control. I would always try and buy it prior if it's at the right price.
That is the case with all negotiation when you're buying real estate, because the agent always knows more than you do, and the vendor is always going to be out of control in terms of out of your control. I mean, sometimes we puppet the agent because we can see that they are not managing the vendor well enough. But I would say it's interesting. We track auction pre-sales versus at auction sales. And most times that you are paying a premium on average at auction. There's no doubt about it. But there are some times you can't avoid going to auction. We just seen it flip just in the last month or so in Sydney. Just seen it flip where people are paying more on average pre-auction than they are at auction. So
yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
it's different everywhere. There's there's markets within markets right across the country. So it's difficult for me to take a view on.
Got to track it. Yeah,
what the market's doing at any given point. But I find that if it's going to auction, it's typically because they've either, they've got buyer competition, or they've got a vendor that's got inflated expectations. Now, they may have been inflated by the agent, and the agent needs the auction to condition them, or they're inflated by their own self-worth, and the agent still needs that process to run it. So I find that we try to weed out those motivated sellers at the right price early, and reduce our buyer competition, because my strike rate at auction is poor. And I would, having done it so many times and been a part of, I'm sure 1,000 auctions or whatever over 30 years, I just won't be swayed any other way that's the way to buy property. It's just not for me, having been on both sides of the fence. And just, I know the conversion rate for us is just not good at auction, because you can only go to where you see value, and beyond that, we almost always get mowed down by banker mum and dad or someone with bigger pockets that effectively overpays for the property where there's no comparable sales evidence to give us faith that it's the right number.
There can be a lot of that. I'm just not going
to take that risk with my clients.
I was reading something the other day, and I think it was said Pareto principle, 20% of the agents would sell 80% of the properties. I think it was like
80/20.
I think it was 10% are selling 60%, I think the article was. But so it's a lot of it's going to the big fish in the markets, right? And they take a long time to get there, then they try to dominate that market for as long as possible, right? But when you're dealing with those sort of, maybe say the other 40% of properties are sold by the other 90% of the agents, right? And some have been doing it for 2 minutes, some have been doing it for 2 years. How do you sort of work with them when you know that like their sales skills on getting the vendor over the line's actually not that great, and you feel like you've got to give them the story to then tell their vendor why they should take the offer, because they're just so fresh and they're still learning the rules of the game?
It's Christmas morning for me, Chris, when that happens. I absolutely love unwrapping that process. Yeah, that's
you are the
joy to me.
puppeteer.
Yeah, I love it. So, I mean, the simple thing is always going to be rapport, right? Rapport is everything to me. So as quickly as possible, build a relationship with that agent. And it's about meeting people where they're at. So you might be very analytical, Chris. Veronica might be a chatter who, wants to have a talk. I'll find a way to make friends with the grandma that wants to talk about her grandkids. I'll find a way to talk to the 21-year-old about they're just new to the industry and how much fun it is, or blah, 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 whatever, right? Find a way to meet them where they're at. So that gives them confidence to open up the dialogue with you. They'll always tell you more if they know, like, and trust you, right? So that's the first thing I do, is rapport is everything. The trick that I do, I would say, is that I do a lot of my negotiation by SMS. And if I've got a inexperienced agent, and even sometimes a very, very experienced agent, because they'll do exactly the same thing, it's just human psychology, I will write word for word what I would say to close that vendor if I was the agent, that the agent can never say, because they will burn the relationship with them and they'll never do it. So I will literally write it for them, because I know word for word they're going to forward that email or that SMS straight to their customer, because they know they want to say it, but they can't say it. They cannot say it because it'll kill their campaign. So I pre-frame the whole thing and I'll write it out, give them all the reasons why this is the thing. So it's almost like me being able to write a direct letter straight to the vendor.
Yeah.
And that has worked a treat for me over the years.
But if they have other buyers swarming around, they're not going to need that from you. You know what I mean? Like, so
But that's the same with every negotiation. If there's other people around there, then you lose those opportunities, and you've got to come up with other ways.
So you're utilising that. So effectively, you're helping them do their job because they're not going to sell it otherwise.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, you can never change that. If there's buyer competition that you've got in it, well, then you simply have to just always fall on your comparable sales evidence and where you've got confidence to act. If it goes beyond that, you're out. If you can buy it within that range, you buy it. And that goes back to that. Well, we might not have saved any money, but we won it in buyer competition, and we didn't have to overpay for it. You secured that property in traffic, which is a win.
Yeah.
How do you really when the property is not great? I guess it happens with us all the time. As you get more experience, you get more market knowledge, you understand things a little bit more complex. You get a better understanding of what's a good asset or what are some of the compromises your buyers are overlooking, and and then they'll jump on a call with me and I'll say, hang on a sec, I know those are all great things and you're convincing yourself, but you do realize that's one of the busiest roads in town and you've got massive privacy problems. Oh, but it's beautiful, you know what I mean? Like, so as a negotiator, how are you managing that complex with your clients? Like, are you literally saying, hey, I really should reconsider buying this property. I think you should keep looking and playing the long game. How do you do it?
Everything for me comes back to transparency and just being honest with people. So I will call it and say to them, like, there's a train line out the back. I loved Veronica's post this morning on LinkedIn, which I commented on, that, a difficult property to sell now is going to be a difficult property for you. Effectively, I butchered your quote, but difficult property for you to sell, later on. And I will say it,
easy to buy, hard to sell.
Yeah, exactly. I told you I'd butcher it. All good. But the same message, right? Like, so I will say to them, these are the challenges with this property. It's next to a childcare centre. Yeah. That's going to affect capital growth. It's on a roundabout. It's got a bus stop out the front. It's whatever. It's got a flood zone crossing part of the land. These are things that are going to impact other buyers in future. So we address those things. And I think that's really important that, my post today on LinkedIn was about another major buyer's agency that a friend of mine, a contact, was with for 6 months plus. They put a property in front of him that was in a flood zone. They did all the due diligence. They presented it as a flood zone. And then, just a dog shit asset in an average location. And then he said to me, I just cannot make sense of this. No rhyme or reason. Like, this doesn't look like a good property, but they're really pushing me to buy it. I'm like, they're really pushing you to buy it because you've been there for 6 months plus and they want to get rid of you. And this is just a really lazy way of doing that. So the opposite of that for us is we would present that property to you. For example, if you had put that property to us, I would have raised that. And I said, okay, well, it's in a flood zone. That's impacted my appraised number, my market estimate. And that's something that we need to talk about. We need to workshop it because that will impact the buyer competition that you've got. So I think it's really important to do that. But I don't know how thorough people are doing these things or cutting corners, because it's very easy to have an emotional buyer and you go, yeah, right, that's that number 1,417 Princess Highway is a beautiful spot. Yeah, you should buy it.
Oh, it's the only way I'm going to get in the market. It's the only way I'm going to get in. It's hard because, I mean, when buyers bringing you something as well, they've already invested emotionally in buying that property. So, and I know that ourselves, and when people come to us when they're looking for an evaluate negotiate service, they've decided they want to buy it, which is why they're willing to pay someone to help them buy it. And it's like they don't really want to hear straight up. Like it's taken early on. I used to turn clients away all the time, and then I'd find that they go and bloody buy it themselves anyway without any help, and the agent would nail their feet to the floor. And I went, okay, we'll take you on, but we have to go through the process of showing you and taking the unveiling why we're not going to we won't recommend it. And if you do go ahead and buy it, at least you got your eyes wide open, and you won't overpay.
So to the point that we were talking about earlier about, localized BAs versus people going it alone and doing it themselves, there's a point at which you have to step back and do a 10,000-foot view and go, these people are adults. It's their own money.
Yeah.
They live in the suburb already. They want to live there. Yep. It's the only place they can afford that they're fallen in love with. The kids love it and they want to buy it.
Yeah. So that's cool.
My
but what
job
if
is
they're
to
not
buy
local?
it at the best possible price, but highlight those concerns. I'm not going to say to them, don't buy it, and then you're looking for another 10 months because you can't afford anything else in the suburb. You have to be commercial about it as well, right?
Yeah. But what if they're not local? Like, what if they are buying the investment across the country, or they're relocating and they really don't know? I mean, they really need a buyer's agent. They need a local.
I mean, I had a client literally that same situation last year, and used a buyer's agent. They already picked the buyer's agent before they came to me, right? I've already engaged these guys, but I want to work with you. And, then they're sending me the properties the buyer's agent's recommending. Massive organisation, buying, one of the biggest out there in terms of this investment space. And it keeps sending, the properties they kept sending me were just horrible. Like, we're talking backing onto power lines. We've got the worst streets in the suburb.
How can you buy 100? Yeah, how can you buy 100 of these things a month in these cities? Like, there is not 100 good properties in Toowoomba a month that come on the market for an investor.
There are not.
But there's 20 buyers agencies, like big agencies, buying 50 of them a month or 75 of them a month, and 83% of them are off market. It's like, we've seen this. Veronica and I have sat on the other side of it. Chris, no doubt you've seen a lot of this yourself as well. But there is not a week that goes by that I don't get a past customer or a friend or a family member say, "Hey, I'm looking at this property. Can you please run your eyes over it?" And it's a dog shit asset, and it's through one of these brand name buyers agencies that's charging them a fortune. And I'll give you an example. One of these very high profile ones in a big city in Australia is called The Catcher by the agents on the ground, right? And it's because you throw them any shit and they catch everything. And that's the reputation they've got within the agents. But then out there, winning awards and all the rest of it as kind of one of the top dogs in the country. It's like it's just the whole thing's done wrong.
It's so appalling. And like I talk to sales agents across the country and I get their stories, and it's mortifying. Absolutely mortifying. But anyway, we don't want to go there.
Yeah,
I mean, got a Dumbo for us?
We don't refer
is a Dumbo.
to that person, but might be a similar person, might not be. But I mean, when the first one came, I was like, oh. And it's always a bit weird because we don't refer there, then we only get these situations, or situations when they've bought them, they've come to us years down the line. So we've got lots of those stories where clients have come to us, "Oh, how did you buy that? Or who bought that?" And then so and so. I was like, "Oh, okay." But yeah, this was one where it was like the first one was like really bad, and the next one had been on the market. Everything is selling in days. This one had been on the market for 6-8 weeks. Like, it was literally the bottom end, and I think that's just really, really frustrating because the client was like, at the mercy of the buyer's agent, right? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges you might see from negotiation is that you put your trust in someone, and then obviously they're not buying you the quality stuff. You sort of you're double losing, right? You buy a shit asset and you're overpaying. Have you got a property Dumbo for us here?
The volume part of it is a concern.
Yeah.
Well, I think. Well, yeah, you go.
There you go. That's the question. Yep.
I'm waiting for your Dumbo.
Yep.
Dumbo of the week. All right. Well, for me, I had this a couple of weeks ago, which is very relevant for me, and it's something that I've had a lot over my career. I probably haven't taken a huge amount of notice of it, but I had to have a bit of a chuckle with my customer last week or the week before. So we'd made an offer on a property. It was first weekend on the market. And the agent told us, "Don't give me an offer before the Saturday because it's not going to do you any help. Wait till the Monday, and then I'll be able to hopefully put this together. I just need to show them that basically no one else turns up at the price level, and we can get this done." So we make the offer on the Monday. We follow instructions, and the agent was going to the property at some point during that day. So my customer was jogging past the house, basically probably all day. Probably did about 30 Ks that day, just to track every person that was going through there by private inspection, what the agent was doing. Their partner had sat at the open for inspection from 15 minutes before it to 15 minutes afterwards. And, of course, come to the assumption that there's no buyer interest, no serious buyer interest, and that our offer is what they should take. The Monday call or text message was along the lines of the agent at the open home parks on the other side of the road, but they're parked in the driveway now, which signals to me that they're inside closing the owner on my offer. I'm like, this is a really great assumption to make. And it's what buyers do often is that they get emotionally involved and they arrive at outcomes that are just, fictitious. And they make these things up in their mind, and they're playing with hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and they're making these decisions with very clouded judgment. And that, pre-frames what they may do next. If that came back to a negotiation where a stage 2, they may have been influenced to pay more or whatever it might have been because they had made some assumptions. So I think really dangerous to do, something that emotional buyers do consistently, but a funny one that I had last couple of weeks. My response to him on the text message was, he's seen you jogging
Get out of there.
He's talking to the vendor about jacking up the price because he knows you're emotionally invested. Yeah.
They weren't private investigators, these guys, were they?
No.
A somewhat similar one is when I get a client comes to me generally in evaluate, negotiate. And so they've created a whole fiction in their head about any other buyers that are interested, their whole backstories, everything. And they reckon they know how the option's going to play out. I'm like,
Yeah.
can we put that aside? Let's just close the door on that. We're going to start from scratch and really work out what the real situation is. But it's so hilarious. Well, they won't be doing this because of that. And I'm like, oh my God. Like if we go to auction with your theories on how this thing is going to play out, we definitely, you'll either overpay or you won't pay. I mean, it's just not going to be good. But it's so funny how people get very invested and crazy.
It did give me an idea, though.
Well, it's been a fun chat.
I've got a little camera that I put in the backyard that's one of those night cameras, and I just sort of take photos of the bandicoots and stuff. But that's not a bad little strategy, right? You could just dump this in the front yard of the property, track everyone who looks at the property over 24 hours.
You could.
It's,
there's a business idea.
There's no issues with that, is there? So thanks, Scott, for coming on, mate. It was a good chat.
Yeah, please don't. Thanks,
no worries.
Scott.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Fun chat.
If you have a question that you'd like us to answer in an upcoming Q&A episode, you can send us a voicemail or written question via the website, theelephantintheroom.com.au, or you can email us directly at questions@theelephantintheroom.com.au. If you like what you're hearing, please share this episode with others you feel would benefit. And while you're at it, why not leave us an iTunes review? 5 stars would be great. I know that sounds a bit cringy, but we have it on good authority that every review helps make it easier for other people to find out about us and hear what our amazing guests have to say.